I had to cut it short. If anyone wants to ask me questions, I can put my email in the chat.
Rav Katz, we horen je niet.
Staat op mute. Rav Katz, u staat nog op mute.
Doesn't hear us. Rav Katz, we don't hear you.
Staat nog op mute.
Okay, again. So okay, the she wasn't said. Thank you, Frank, for Israel, for Pertikva. The she wasn't said, but kablonos and beschiras and beschayom was said, mamash, but the divas life. Thank you so much. It was beautiful and was really a testimony to the gewaltig zies the Koil is doing here. You should be zogen to go Michael Koil and just and to become a greater Rabbis Torah, a greater Koil. And now we are waiting now for Dayan Gelley. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. And Zay Matzliach, Rabbi Bol. Boom, boom, boom. Dayan Gelley, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, a warm welcome. A warm welcome. Look, in a few days from now, Boris Johnson will go on the biggest trip England has in the last 50 years on a Brexit. But I know I've gotten to know you beforehand and even more through the Conference of European Rabbis. So I know once the fact that you are giving the Shia shows maybe politically there will be a Brexit between the United Kingdom and the Netherlands and Europe and in trade. But in Torah, we are joining forces even more. We feel even more closer. And we're therefore so happy that you are here today with us to give a share. Let me just find you over here on the screen that I can get you in. Okay, there we are.
So we're ready?
Yeah. Please.
Okay. Bereshus Moav Rabbi Sai. I see some lovely names over here. Some echte Dutch Holland names. I greet you all. As you will know, this time of the year, in most places in the world, Shurim take place, and we are not short of work and avodas hakodesh this part of the world too. However, with the greatest respect and admiration and esteem for my colleague, Rabbi Shmuel Katz HaKohen, there's a Gemara which says, teaches us, Ein Mesarvim Negodo. You don't refuse a great person, and therefore, as soon as Rabbi Katz called me and asked you, I said, listen, doesn't matter what's on, I don't have to see my diary, you tell me when you want, and I'm here at your service for yourself and for Kehila Kedosha Amsterdam. A great Kehila in the past, you've got a great rich history, you've had great Gedolim, and so it's my pleasure to bring a little bit of Torah to the community. You know, just talking about Limud Torah, let me preface my comments. Chazal tell us, Hayoim Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai, even before the Jewish people came to accept the Torah, it says Hayom Hazeh, and Hayom Hazeh referring to a particular day, but we've got Torah every day. So our Chazal teach us Shebechol Yom Yiyu Beinecho Kechadoshim. Every single day, Torah has got to be vibrant, alive, inspiring, as if it would be given on that very day, as if it would be new. And this is repeated over actually many times in Chazal and the Torah, referring to specific mitzvahs, to all areas of Torah. And the question really is, why? What is this midah that we've always got to see something new in Torah, something vibrant, something... And perhaps the pshat is as follows. You know, the Chazal tell us, Barosi Yetzer Hara, I created an evil inclination in man, Barosi Torah Tavlin. But to counter that, I created the spice of Torah, which is always present to counter a Yetzer Hara. So the Mesilas Yesharim, Lutzato, teaches us in Perek Yutei something very special, something very important. We may think that we've got many remedies against this Yetzer Hara. Don't worry, we'll manage it ourselves. We're reasonable people, we're intelligent people, we'll do what's right, we'll do what's morally correct, and etc. Says the Mesilas Yesharim, make no mistake. If Chazal said, if our sages taught us, Barosi Torah Tavlin, Barosi Yetzer Hara, Barosi Torah Tavlin, Chazal are teaching us that the only antidote against the Yetzer Hara that lurks on the outside and the Yetzer Hara that's inside, is Torah, is Limud HaTorah. Friends, every day they are renewed Yitzrei Hara. Don't want to blame your precious town, but Amsterdam is known for its very liberal views. Some of it come across to our parts of the world. So London could be to blame as well. And the whole of Western society, every time, things that 60 years ago were criminal have now not become criminal, not only become allowed, all of a sudden become a mitzvah. And if we speak against certain things that are against Torah practice, we're reprimanded. Are you not with the times? And that's what Chazal are teaching us. If every single day we see something renewed in Torah, something interesting in Torah, then that acts as our antidote against the forces that sometimes that are outside and sometimes even prevail outside. So therefore, Rabbi Katz, we thank you for bringing an extra chelik of Torah to your Chosheva community. And without further ado, I will begin some Divrei Torah this afternoon. Okay, I'd like to ask the following shaila. Ask it in the form of a question, and we'll go from there. We all know that in Hilchos Shabbos, there is a klal called Meleches Machsheves, which applies to Shabbos, singular to Shabbos, particular to Shabbos. From there, we learn a host of halachas le'inyan, the malachas of Shabbos, that I've got to have kavana, that could be the malacha to be constituted as malachas, got to be done in a particular way, etc. We also know a halacha, and I saw on your special program a shia from one of the other rabbonim referring to Amira L'Nochri. Amira L'Nochri, the prohibition against instructing a non-Jewish person to do malacha on Shabbos. Rabbi Katz, has that shia taken place already?
Just before.
Oh, just before. Okay. So therefore, you all know all halachas. So therefore, it's great that this follows on straight afterwards. That's really divine providence, hashgacha pratis. So there is a halacha in Hilchos Shabbos that's called Dover She'eino Mischaven. What does Dover She'eino Mischaven means? If I do a malacha on Shabbos, where I had no intention doing that, I've got no interest in doing it, I don't intend to do that malacha, then the halacha is, we pass by Reb Shimon, who says, Dover She'ein Mischaven. If I had no intention to do this malacha, then not only am I potter if I did it, it's actually mutter if I did it. If I did this malacha, then if I'm allowed to do the malacha. For example, a simple example, can I walk on grass on Shabbos? Can I even run on grass on Shabbos? What's the problem? That there is a halacha on Shabbos. If I am to bend down and pluck out grass from the karka, I'm over a malacha of toilesh. I am plucking from the ground. It's a malacha. If I walk on ground, and my intention is just to use the grass as a shortcut to get from one place to another, or I'm going for a walk in the park, and I walk on ground, I've got no interest, no intention of mowing the grass. I leave that to the county council, and it's of no interest to me. I just want to get where I want to get. But it could be that whilst I walk, my weight and my shoes may actually lift up a blade of grass from the ground, and now will be over a malacha of toilesh. Am I allowed to walk on this grass when I could be over a malacha? So some areas of Torah, we say, Safek min ha-Torah lahachmir. We all know that's a klal. You know, if I've got a piece of meat and I don't know if it's kosher, if it's not kosher, I don't know where it's come from. So I've got to say, I don't know. And if it's a safek, I've got to be machmir. So do I also say over here, listen, it may pick it up, it may pluck out the grass from the karka. And if it does, it's a malacha. So I'm not allowed to walk. The halacha is no. You know, it's often you ask people, why is it that one may not brush teeth on Shabbos? So people will say to you, oh, because you may bleed. Now, it is true that people who have got a propensity to bleed, and they know whenever they brush their teeth, they bleed. So that is true. Then when you brush, you know you're going to create a wound. That is... taking out dam is a malacha of netilas neshama, chabura, whatever the malacha is, of sheichet, of netilas neshama, whatever, and therefore it cannot be done. But most people, when they brush teeth, it rarely bleeds. It may. The halacha is on Shabbos, it is mutter. It is mutter. You're allowed to. There's other reasons why you can't brush your teeth, because the toothbrush absorbs water and it's chita, and if you use toothpaste and it's mamareach, you're spreading, so you can't. But the problem that people think is because it'll bleed, that isn't a problem on Shabbos, unless someone knows that's always the case. I don't know if any of you here are moihalim. There's always an issue of using a probe on Shabbos. Sometimes the orla, I can only see names. I can't see face. I see a face, I would know you're a moil or not. But in any case, sometimes a probe is used in order to release the orla, and very often that bleeds. And people always ask the Shaila, can you use it on Shabbos? And the poskim generally hold there isn't a problem, because it certainly doesn't inevitably come, and therefore it's a davar she'ein mischaven. And if it does bleed, it does bleed. And the same thing with an injection on Shabbos. If it's not meant to bleed, someone takes. If they're taking it in order to get blood, that's a problem. We've just had a big shaila where surgeries open on Shabbos to give the vaccine. And they say they don't want people in the surgery during the week, they're too busy, but they want it only on Shabbos, only on weekends. And if someone misses the turn, they're going to miss it. And yes, they'll give them next week. Next week is also Shabbos. And next week is also Shabbos. So can they receive a vaccination on Shabbos? It's an interesting shaila on its own. Obviously, if it's pikuach nefesh, they should receive it. Then it's going to be mutter on Shabbos. But part of the issue is, injection. The issue is you aiding and abetting, assisting. That's the question of Messiah. It's another shaila halacha which I'm not going to have time to discuss today. I can see you're running to a tight clock, and we're going to try not to go over, so I don't want to deviate. Now, at the same time, there is a halacha called psik reisha. What does psik reisha mean? It says the Gemara, Moider Reb Shimon b'psik reisha, that if I do something where invariably, inevitably, even though that is not my kavona for something to take place. For example, in the case in the Gemara talks about someone's outside, beautiful weather outside, and there's a big bench. You want to sit together with the family, but it's in the wrong place. It's against the sun, and the person wants to sit in the sun, so he wants to move the bench. If he moves the bench is heavy, and it may make a charitz, a little furrow, a little ditch in the ground, in the earth on Shabbos. That is a problem, making that may be a malacha of choresh, it can be a malacha of boina, whatever the malacha is. If he pulls the bench along, he's got no intention in making ditches and furrows the other way around. He's happier if it all stays. And he doesn't really know the weight of this bench, whether it's just going to slide nicely, glide along, and etc., or it's going to dig its feet in and pull it along. So the Gemara says the following: if it's a small, light bench, then fine to pull it along. And even were charitz to be created, it's a dover she'eino mischaven. He has no intention to make this charitz, and therefore it's perfectly mutter. And if he did something, he doesn't need to do tshuva. If he did make a ditch, he doesn't need a kapara. There's a famous Rabbi Kiva Eiger in Siman Tes, declares a shaila. There's something on Shabbos besides Vador Shem Ischavim, which is called misasek. Misasek. Misasek, it means to say the following. Let's talk about it. There's something on Shabbos called shoygeg. Chas v'shalom, if a person switches a light on Shabbos, b'shoygeg. He didn't do it presumptuously, it was a shoygeg. What's a shoygeg? Either he forgot that it's Shabbos, or he forgot that you're not allowed to put a light on Shabbos. He forgot, he went blank. So Allah, he needs the kapara. The times of Beis HaMikdash, he would need the korban chatos. Basically, he needs to do tshuva. Well, he forgot. Says the Gemara, don't forget, be mindful in Shabbos, and therefore you need a kapara. What's Allah if someone bent up to pick up a loose flower that was lying on the ground, and it's beautiful looking, a tulip from Holland, and he bends down to pick it up, and he thought it was loose, and he picked it up, and oy vey vey, he realizes it was mechube, it was joined to the ground, and when he picked it up, it snapped off the ground, and therefore he was over a malacha of toilish. Does he need to bring a korban? Says the Gemara, no, he doesn't. What's the difference between them? Because in the case of a light, he knew he was putting a light on Shabbos. He just forgot it was Shabbos, or he forgot you're not allowed to put a light on. But he intended to do what he intended to do. That's chomor, that's serious, and therefore, even though it was shoygeg is korev the mazid. It's similar to a mazin, of course he needs a kapara. Says Rabbi Kiva Eiger, misasek, where he bent down and he didn't intend plucking it. You can't say it's an oinus. He intended picking it up, but he thought the situation was a different situation to what it was. On that, the Gemara says it's a misasek and he's potter from a chatos. If a person did something completely by oinus, someone pushed him and he fell, and as he fell, he plucked something, and of course he doesn't need a kapara. Oinus, rachmana patre. Oinus, he's got no chiyuv altogether. Misasik is somewhere in the middle, and Rabbi Kiva Eiger says, declares to say, questions, the could be he doesn't need a kapara. He did nothing wrong. He thought what he was doing was mutter, was a maisa mutter, and it turned out the maisa, the deed was a maito iseres. Yeah, Rabbi said, please challenge me. If you feel what I'm saying is wrong, then tell me, put up your hand and tell me, and we'll try and explain it better. But that, what I've said till now, I will not accept your challenge because it's 100% correct. Okay. now let's go a little bit further. So dovo she'eino mischavein, not only does he not need a kapora, it's mutter. And if at the end of the day something will happen as a result, then doesn't matter. It doesn't apply only to Shabbos. The Gemara says that they used to on the Beis HaMikdash pour wine on the Mizbeach, and sometimes that wine on the Mizbeach may put out some of the flame of the Mizbeach, and halacha is there was a lav min haTorah, was not allowed to put out the eish shalatzei hamarocha, it's issa min haTorah, but he wasn't mischaven for that. He didn't intend doing that. The man d'omar dova sheina mischaven is mutter. You can pour yayin al gabe he'ishem. That's the halacha. But if it's a psik ratio, which means to say it's a very heavy bench, and you know fine well that it's going to dig into the ground, even though you've got no interest of it digging into the ground, it's like malev loy morid for you, it's of no consequence. The moider of Shimon, the Gemara said of Shimon is moider bepsik ratio v'lo yamos. Or the Gemara says in the situation, the dam chalozoin. Oh, that's another very interesting shir Rabbi Katz for you once about chalozim bisman hazeh, the blue tint dye used for tzitzis bisman hazeh. Does it exist? Does it not exist? That's a fascinating topic. But the Gemara in Shabbos Davayin discusses what happens if one finds this chalozim, whether it was a snail, a fish, there's a Rambam, doesn't matter, and he cuts it open because he wants to take out the blue dye that it contains. He wants to take it out. So the Gemara, he's chayav. So the Gemara questions, but let him also be chayav because he's killed the fish. Says the Gemara, no, he didn't intend to kill the fish. He's happy the fish should live. They don't want the fish to die. If I can, let the fish live and let it create more dye, and then he'll take more ink out of it in 6 months' time, and he'll sell it and he'll make money. So Gemara says, yes, but you know that if you give a fatal blow to this fish by trying to get the dye out of it, you want the dye, it's gonna die, and it's gonna die. It's psik ratio, it must happen. Psik ratio for the yomos. Is there such a thing as cutting off the head of an animal and saying, yeah, but I didn't think it was gonna die? If you cut it off, it's going to die. Mimela says the Gemara, he should be chayav. So you see this concept. What's my shaila of today? The shaila of today is the following. Can one ask a nochri, a non-Jewish person, to do a malacha on Shabbos, which is a dovo she'eino mischavein, but it's a psik ratio? Let me give you a wonderful, simple example of it. You have a fridge there, a fridge. The fridge has a light on. If you open the door, then the light will automatically go on. And a Yid cannot do that because he's creating the light illuminating on Shabbos. It's forbidden, it's also. However, it is certainly a dover she'eino mischaven because he doesn't need the light. He knows exactly where he put the gefilte fish, and he can blindly put his hand inside and take out the gefilte fish or the mayonnaise or whatever else may be hiding inside a Dutch fridge, I don't know. So the halacha is a Yid certainly can't do it. What's the halacha to ask a non-Jewish person? So we all know you can't ask a non-Jewish person to do a malacha. Here I'm asking the non-Jewish person to open a fridge. Dover she'eino mischaven. He's opening a fridge. Perfectly permissible for him to open a fridge on Shabbos. And even if the engine will go on or off, it doesn't matter. The goy hasn't got to be makpid on the shittas chazanish of electricity and etc. Nothing wrong if the goy opens for you the fridge on Shabbos. However, the light is going to go on. So I say, just like a psik ratio, if a Yid does a dover she'eino mischaven, but it's a psik ratio, something else is going to happen, then the Yid is liable, is culpable for the end result. So because I know that when I open the fridge, then the light's going to go on, so B'meila, I can't ask a goy to open the fridge, because to ask a goy to put a light on Shabbos, you also can't do. And even derech remez, which you will have learned in halacha, where I'm allowed to hint to a non-Jewish person to put a light off on Shabbos, I'm siluk, I can tell him I can't sleep, the light's on in the bedroom, etc., and he'll come and put it off. That's permissible. It's never permissible to do an action of which I'm going to benefit from, which is havora, the light's going to burn, etc. So can I tell a non-Jewish person, here we call him Chris, for argument's sake, can I tell Chris or Christine, the young lady who helps around, please open the fridge door for me on Shabbos? Because mitzad the fridge, it's mutter, and it's a dover she'ena mischavein. I don't have kavana for the light, but I know that the light's going to on's level. It's psik ratio vis-a-vis the light, so a yid certainly can't do it. But would I be allowed to ask the guy to do it? So I've got quite a few sources over here. I'll just run through them very quickly. There's a Mishnah Berurah and Rishon and Gimel who talks about the following situation. If one has food that is cooled down and it is solid, so therefore we all know the halacha on Shabbos, if you've got a solid food that is cold, it can be warmed up on Shabbos. You can't put it on a flame or on the oven because there's halachas of Shia, Chazorah, of putting back, midrabanon, but min haTorah, ein bishulach habishul, it's cooked. So there the question is the following. They also had ovens like what we would call today radiators. Can I tell a non-Jewish person to put it on top of a cold radiator, and then during the winter when it's cold, the halacha is, I'm sure you learned in your previous shia, the heating is an exception, and one is allowed to ask a non-Jewish person to put on heating if one is very cold on Shabbos. Why? Because since one's allowed to ask a non-Jewish person to do malacha for a choila, for a person who's sick, even if he's not an ill person, even if he's not a dangerously ill person, there's no pikuach nefesh. But the person who's got a bad flu, he's in bed and etc., and it's freezing cold, and even the person who hasn't got the flu, it's freezing cold, we're all considered cholim, unwell people vis-a-vis cold. It'll make us unwell. It's you sit in the chill and you're breathing in freezing air and you stay there for extended period of time, so you're allowed to ask a guy. So what does he want to do? Tells Chris, do me a favor, Chris, put this plate of kugel or kigel, whatever you'll call it, on top of the radiator. And then he goes and tells Christine, it's really freezing over here. Do me a favor, can you put the radiators on? So Christine will put the radiators on, but at the same time, those radiators will heat up the kugel. She may not even know about the kugel. She does know about the kugel, but the reason why Christine is putting on the heating is because the house is cold and she wants to warm it up. And the halacha is that's permissible for a goy to do on Shabbos. You can ask a goy. But it's psik reisha as far as the food is concerned. Brings the Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah follows. That if it's an English kichen, he calls it. So it seems in those days already they had an English oven, which means that the bulk of the oven was for heat, to heat the home, but it had a hob on top which released the heat and heated the food. So then he says, the malacha of putting on the oven is a twin malacha, a dual malacha at once. It's not heating the home and by consequence, it is also going to heat up this food. The purpose of lighting an oven is for heat and for food. So then you cannot ask the goy to do it because you can't ask the goy to heat up food on Shabbos. That's poshet. If it's just a regular Russian oven that the Mishnah Berurah would have been talking about in Rad in those parts of the world, so the oven wasn't made to cook food, and the purpose of the goy is to create heat. Even though and the gab of the food, it's a dover shein mischaven and not mechaven to heat up the food. So some Mishnah Berurah questions. It could be okay. There's a similar situation when you're talking about blocking the pi hatanur, the entrance of the tanur in those days, where the flue for the smoke, blocking it because you don't want all the smoke that's coming out, even though as a result the coals inside will go out, but they'll be starved of oxygen, they can go out. And the Mishnah Berurah questions that you can't do it, obviously, because you'd be goyim, you'd cause them to go out, but you can ask the goy to block them because really he's only doing a maisa of blocking the smoke. even though as a direct result of that psik reisha, it's going to put the coals out, that's also permittable. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, in the case of the fridge, questions may be a little different, because he says it may not be a question of cause and effect. When I pull a bench, I want really to pull the bench to where I want it. And the consequence may be that it creates this chritz, this ditch, this furrow. He says, however, where there's a fridge which is attached in the olden days with a little protruding little piece that when you close it, it puts it off, you open it, it releases it. He says that could be tantamount to a light switch. So it's so true, the opening of the door is the real reason is to get to the fridge and not to put the light off and on, but it's done in one action. The same opening of the door, that's how you operate the light. How do you operate a Frigidaire light switch? You open the door. So if you open the door, you're putting the light on. It's not a secondary Maisa action or consequence as a result of my first one. It is all the same Maisa. I'm opening the door, putting a switch on. What's the difference if I pull a string and the light goes on, or I press a switch, the light goes on, or I open a door and pulls the lights on? Shlomo Zalman questions this, but it doesn't come to an absolute answer on this. Is it worse than psik reisha, or is it not worse than psik reisha? Similarly, if ever you've got an outdoor marquee, I don't know how you're all managing for your shuls, whether you're allowed to go inside. A lot of people have got outdoor marquees where we are. And the question is, are you allowed to sweep them? Because you actually will be sweeping ground on Shabbos. And that's also a problem of Ashvuya Gumois, of smoothing the ground, which is a malacha on Shabbos. So it's written a question whether a goy can do it, even though the kavana was only to sweep and just to issue alfaroman, it should be clean and smooth, etc. But at the same time, he may be filling in little ditches, which will be binyan, and it's a question whether a nochri can do that or not. So, bottom line, we're left with a shaila over here, a question. Seems a moot point. Seems that the poiskim were more lean more towards allowing it. They're not, but it's an open question. Are you allowed to ask a nochri something that is psik reisha? Question is, my friends, now we want to get a little bit lomdish. This was factual, lomdish, and try and explain what the point of the shaila is. Why yes and why no? Whenever there's a query, a question, then there's got to be a reason why yes and why no. It's very important in the education of children. I guide my community, my parents learn with children, they learn Mishnayos or Gemara, and they say, Rabbi Yehuda, I'm muta, v'chachamim oimrim osa. And then they just carry on. Rabbi Yehuda said it's muta, Chacham say it's osa. So that's not educational. It's not good enough. You've got to say, Rabbi Yehuda says muta. Why does it say muta? And if we understand him, also, why does it say also? You've got to understand each view. Otherwise, we're just saying words. So we've got an argument over here between two opinions as to whether you can ask a goy to do something which is psik reisha. And I'm going to try and explain a little bit what the point of this argument is. What does it depend on? What is it contingent upon? And this little piece I take from my Rebbe, Reb Shmuel Rozovsky, who was Rosh Hashiva in Ponevezh, who was niftar over 30, over that years ago. And he was a Talmud of Reb Shimon Shkop of Grodno. And he posed the following question, the following contradiction. The very interesting halacha in Shulchan Aruch, Yeridea, Simon Pei Zayin, who says the following. In those days, there were wayfarers, people who traveled, and obviously at night, inclement weather, they stayed at an inn. When they stayed at an inn, then there's no kosher hermelis meals waiting for them, and all the luxuries that we have today of arranging kosher food, etc., didn't exist. and they had to make do. The Jew, the traveling Jew, would have gone in, and in his room or in the kitchen where he was, there would have been a stove which was not necessarily lit, and he would have been cold, and he wants to light the stove so that he can keep warm. However, on top of the stove, as part of the fixed pertinences to the kitchen there were empty kalim, there were jugs and pots and pans and etc., which would have been heated up by this heat. What's the problem? Was it the shaila? So what's wrong? Let them get heated up. It's weekdays, Sunday night. So what could possibly be the shaila? And the Ramah Paskins, be careful, don't do it. Can anyone hazard a guess of what the shaila is? Says Shulchan Aruch, this pot may have once had meat cooked in it, may have another time had milk cooked in it. It may have once had meat cooked with milk. So what's wrong? Okay, but he's not eating it. Are you aware, besides for not eating basar b'chalav, there's an issa of bishul of basar b'chalav. A Jew is not allowed to cook. He's not allowed to cook meat and milk together. We have that sometimes with people who don't know, and they act as restaurateurs, and they say, we don't eat it, we don't touch it, we're just the chef in the kitchen. But it's a serious problem that even though it's non-kosher meat and milk, well, milk is milk, and etc., but it's still an issa of basar b'chalav. The Gemara's got a question if it's a non-kosher species, if it's pork or bacon, what's halacha with chalav? But if it's a behemoth, if it's cow or lamb or etc., even though it's treif, even though it's nevela, then there's a halacha of basar b'chalav. So if so, then a yid is not allowed to cook up that meat. Now here he's not cooking up that meat, but what's he cooking? He's heating up the jug that's got bliois. What are bliois? We all know that if you cook meat in the pot becomes fleshik. If you make it treif, then even though the food's out of the pot, you cannot use the pot. What's wrong? Because the food has been absorbed by the keli, and those bliois are treif. Comes out that there are bliois within the doifanim, the walls of this keli. So when you heat up the pot, you are cooking, in effect, basar b'chalav. Says the Ramah, yesh oimrim, the also lachtois ha'esh tachas keder shel oivei kechavim. Don't put on a fire under a pot belonging to a non-Jewish person. Why? And if you put on the flame, then you're over a issa of bishul of basar b'chalav. And this is written in Hagos Mordechai in Avodah Zorah from the Rishonim. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger there questions this, and he said, hold on a second. But surely he's not mechaven to cook the basar b'chalav. It's his last interest, as something as weird as that, to cook bliois in a pot, the absorbed remnants of a meat in the pot. He's interested in putting the flame to keep warm. So says Rabbi Akiva Eiger, it should be a dovo sheina mischaven. Says Rabbi Akiva Eiger, what do you want to tell me? It's psik reisha. No, it's inevitable, because if there's basar b'chalav inside it, warming up the pot's going to automatically create a psik reisha. It's going to be basar b'chalav. So Ricky, I don't understand, but who said he cooked basar b'chalav? You don't know. Could be it's more than ben yoima. He didn't cook meat. He uses for meat only. He uses for milk only. We don't know whether it's cooked basar b'chalav. So don't tell me it's a psik reisha. If I put on the flame, it's vadai going to be called boiling basar b'chalav. It's not. And legaba, therefore, as far as the pot is concerned, it's dover sheina mischaven. The din of dover sheina mischaven is halacha pertinent to kol haTorah kula. As I told you, as far as the mizbech is concerned, it's not only a Shabbos halacha. So if so, why does he say it's osar? Says Rabbi Akiva Eiger, we're going to have to say the following. We're going to have to say, when I pull a chair along and I don't know if it's going to create this furrow, this ditch, I don't know if the other contrary is going to happen. It's in the future whether this will do something else. As opposed to the case we're talking about, this is all about halacha, which is very carefully analytical. What I'm talking about is, I'm going to heat the pot. If there is basar b'chalav in the pot, there is belios of basar b'chalav in the pot, then I'm certainly going to be over. All that's missing is my knowledge, is there basar b'chalav in the pot or not? But if there is, then what I'm doing is certainly going to do it. I'm only missing some knowledge as to where it's basar b'chalav. While in the case of when I pull the bench or I run on grass with football shoes that have got little studs that may pull out, we don't know whether it's going to happen. We don't know whether this Maisa is going to cause that or not cause that. So he quotes a Taz. And I want you to tell me which case this Taz. I want to tell you another case, and then we'll say a little vote. The Taz says a situation where a person's got an outside, some of these, I don't think it's the case in the Taz, but some of these fancy pieces of garden furniture, they act as, there's a chair, but you can lift them inside, and there's a little trunk, and you can keep your bit of your outdoor stuff, and the cushions for the chairs inside them, and then you close them. Because it's outdoors and it's in a garden, there's often a lot of little flies around and etc. So the question on Shabbos, that if this bench had this inside compartment and the door or the box, the lid was open, and he wants to close the lid, but he's frightened there may be flies inside. Happens sometimes. Flies fly everywhere, they go inside. What's the problem? If he shuts the lid, he'll do tzeidah, he'll be trapping the flies that are inside. Is he mechavan for that? No, he's not. He would never like to harm a fly, as the expression in England goes, and he would much rather all flies disappeared and all went out into the open. He wants to sit down. He couldn't be bothered going through schlepping, doing bedikas chometz every corner. Is there a little fly? Is there not a little fly? He just wants to shut the bench and sit on it. But he will be trapping the fly. Is that allowed on Shabbos or is it not? Says the Taz in Shin Tezayin Ilchas Seder, yes, he can. He can do it. Why can he do it? Because it's a davar she'eino mischaven. What do you want to tell me? It's psik reisha. That is, it's not psik reisha because there may be no flies inside. So that is exactly the case of the pot as well. Maybe that there's a blias, which Shulchan Aruch says it's osa, but the Taz says it's mutar. It's important because the Taz was on Achroin. The halacha of the Ramah is a Hagos, Mordechai is a Rishon, so we need another Rishon from that same generation who will give us a different view, and then we'll have to know how to paskin. There is a Ramban, Nachmanides, where the Ramban in Shabbos talks about the following situation, very interesting situation, where a person removes a boiling pot from the flame on Shabbos, perfectly permissible, turns it upside down and tips out all the hot water, and then wants to fill it with cold water because he wants to put cold water for people to wash teeth, netilas yadayim at the Sheva brachas and etc. So he pours out the hot water. He doesn't need it anymore. Wants to fill it with cold water. So the Gemara asks a kasha, but could be there's a halacha in the halachas of Shabbos, where if a keli isn't complete yet, whereby you're doing the gemar keli by acting a certain process which is called mitzarif. So if you've got a pot which hasn't yet been hardened, it's been created, and you heat it up, and then you put cold water inside, the Gemara explains us that is the culmination of the process of creating a keli, and it's called makabeh patish. It's the last act of creation of the keli, and you cannot put cold water into the pot because that'll create the utensil. So the Gemara says, how can you put cold water inside? Well, Kamatzaref, he's creating the keli. So the Gemara says, no, we don't have a problem because this goes according to Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon holds Dover Shein Mischaven is mutter, and he's got no intention hardening or finalizing the keli. That he'll do in his workshop on a different day. Now he's just interested in putting cold water. So Tosfos asks the kasha, and the Ramban asks the kasha, but what do you mean? It is psik reisha. But if it's going to happen, then he is mesakin the keli, whether he's mechaven for it or not. And if so, it should be also on Shabbos. It should be forbidden. On that answers the Ramban, no. Maybe the hot water wasn't hot enough, and therefore this ritzuf won't take place. Or maybe it's already had this culmination of the process, it's already been hardened, and therefore we can stick with Dover Shein Mischaven. Friends, what's that? Surely that's exactly the same case, because he's doing a ma'aser putting cold water inside. That action could create a utensil, could not. He's not mechaven for it, but if it will, it will. So surely that's like the box of flies, and that's like the situation of Rabbi Kivega against the Ramon. The Ramban says it's mutter. If so, we've got two views. What is this dependent on? Says the Rosh Hashiva as follows. And this is just a further deeper analysis, but then we will have penetrated and we will hit the bottom. Why is it that when I do something which is psik reisha, does it take away from the Dover Shein Mischaven? If I'm not mechaven to it, so what do I care? Inevitably, it's going to happen. And you can learn two ways. You can either learn because when I know it's going to happen, I'm mechaven for it. Because I know if I pull a bench and it always makes a hole. So I can't say I'm not mechaven for it, even though I may not want it, etc. But it's going to happen. So therefore, that's called, I've got kavanah, so it's meleches machshavas. Or you could say no. You could say the following. When I do action A, and action A causes action B, I don't need to be mechaven for B. If I know action A, it's imperative that you should have action B. So in the Maisa A is already Nichlal Maisa B. Doing Maisa A is called making a charitz. What is the Maisa when I go and pull a bench? Is it pulling a bench and it's not making a ditch? No, if it always makes a ditch, then pulling a bench is making a ditch. Dover Shein Mischaven is always potter. One of the reasons is because this is not my Maisa. I didn't have kavanah for it. But once I know it's my Maisa, that's my Maisa. And if Maisa A, running with football boots, with metal studs, is going to call out grass, then don't say I'm only running. No, say I'm pulling out grass. What's the difference between the two? This could come back to our question of Amira Lanochri. That if in the whole reason why Dover Shein Mischaven is or put it this way, if psik reisha is always chayiv because I had intention for it, then that's for a yid. If I tell a goy to open a fridge, then what do I care? He didn't have intention. There's no halacha of psik reisha said on it. If, however, I say where invariably it's going to happen, then the consequence is part of the first Maisa. So when I told him to open a fridge, and opening a fridge makes a light go on, so opening a fridge is making a light go on. So when I told the guy to open a fridge, I'm asking him to do a Maisa of putting a light on, because Maisa B is Nichlal in Maisa A. Just the 2 minutes I've got left, I'll quote to you following Machloikas. Machloikas, the Gedolei Rishonim from the Rambam onwards that when I say psik reisha, does it mean it's inevitable, or does it mean it's most likely? It's got huge nafkaminas ladina. Can I do something on Shabbos? I'm not mechavan, but the majority of times it'll call something. Is that enough to say psik reisha? Or is psik reisha only if it'll always cause it? So let's take the situation, someone brushes their teeth and 7 out of 10 times it bleeds. Is that psik reisha? Or it's got to be 10 times out of 10 times it bleeds. And that's a machlokas. Some say one way, some say other. What's the argument? I maintain it's the same argument. Because if the point is that the reason why psik reisha is also because it's a mechaven, then I can say, if I know in the main that happens, and I know that's going to happen, then I'm mechaven for it, because I know that's going to happen. If, however, psik reisha has got nothing to do with mechaven, no, the psik reisha means to say is because Maisa B is included within Maisa A, Maisa 2 is part of Maisa 1, then I would say the following. It can only be considered part of Maisa 1 if it's inevitable, if it's invariable, if it cannot be without it. Then I say the two are connected. Don't separate the two, because if I do one, it's got to be the other. And that is again the point of this argument. Therefore, coming back to our question, there's a difference between Shabbos and Kol HaTorah Kulo. The pot, which is talking about Dover Sheina Mischaven. So if at the end of the day, it's what's called a psik reisha, Dover psik reisha ova, I just don't know if it's in or not. So if the reason is because I'm over psik reisha because I was mechavan, I intended, at the end of the day, if I didn't know there were flies, I don't intend to do it, so let it be mutter, and etc. If the point is because shutting a bench where there's flies is called trapping, so therefore, if I just don't know whether there's flies or not, it's Sovik Minat Torah, the Chumrah, and I can't do it. Therefore, the Shulchan Aruch, the Paskins in Hilchas, Yeridea with a pot is talking about Kol HaTorah Kula. And there, I'm worried that in Maisa A, it's Nichnal Maisa B. But the Gabba Shabbos, that is Halacha of Meleches Machsheves, which I've got to know what happens. So therefore, the Geder of psik reisha will be a different Geder of psik reisha. The Geder of psik reisha will be that the pshat is that I've got to be mechaven, and therefore, if I don't know, I can't be mechaven for it. Therefore, the Taz is correct in saying that it's mutter. Because otherwise you've got the steer and Shulchan Aruch. You can't have the Taz and the Ramban who are matir and the Shulchan Aruch of Basa B'Cholov who's Oisa, but you've got the steer and Shulchan Aruch. The answer is we're going to make a distinction between psik reisha and Dover Sheina Mechaven, which is relevant to Shabbos. I'll have to prove it to you, but I've gone 30 seconds over, and between Yemei HaChoil. So my rabbi said that was quite a packed share, and I may have to come back one day if it'll allow me to elaborate.
So what's the maskana on Shabbos now, is the guy?
The maskana on Shabbos like the Taz and like the Ramban, that even psik reisha l'sha'ava, it's mutter. It's mutter. The Taz paskined it, and Rabbi Kiva brings this Taz down. Problem was Shulchan Basa B'Cholov. Yes, B'Chol HaTorah Kulo, psik reisha l'sha'ava is also Choluk Chol HaTorah Kulo and Choluk Shabbos. But Rabbi said we have to always have some Havana. If we don't have Havana, we don't have the depth, and we can't be nichnas the oive. It just becomes factual. You say this one says the Rabbanas, the Raisa, but why? Rebbeinu Shalom, why? That's the beauty of Torah Sosai Mishok. Rabbi said, I wish you bracha v'atzlacha for yourselves. Please stay safe, stay gesund, stay well, and I look forward. If Rabbi Katz is generous to me, he'll invite me back another time, and Mitzvah Shem will speak about further topics. Cult of
Rabbi Gelley, Dayan Gelley, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Are you still there, Dayan Gelley?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. What I want to say is like this: that you gave us some chilukim in. Psik reisha and kaven. There's two machines in the psik reisha. Yeah, it's one thing goyrem, something else, or is it already kolu? Lemaisa, you were sitting in London, in your chair in London, but it was lemaisa like mamash. You were sitting in Holland, Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for giving a beautiful shir with difficult concept, and it was with such beautiful words. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you join us in future again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kalto.
Kalto.
Now, everybody else, I'm just going to share an important message for you. U moet nou, en we gaan over 8 minuten verder, maar dan gaan we verder met een ander ID. Dat ziet u hier staan, is 817-3914-3152. Ik heb het u ook gestuurd in de updates, maar nu want ik moet dit afsluiten, anders kan ik niet verder. Dus we gaan zo meteen verder met een webinar. En dat is het ID-nummer voor de rest van de dag. Dat wil zeggen, zowel het programma met Pesach Kroon als het programma vanavond. Dat heeft dus nogmaals als ID-nummer 817-391-43152. 817-391-43152. Is één belangrijk verschil dat we bij een webinar, daar kunnen we elkaar niet zien. Dan kunt u alleen maar de ondergetekende zien. Ik hoop dat u nog niet vermoeid bent van het kijken naar mij. En uiteraard naar degene die daar het woord sporen. Naar de panelist. Dat is dus zometeen is dat Pesach Kroon. Later op de avond is dat dan Rabbi Lewis en Rabbi Brodman. Ik moet het nu sluiten, want allerlei mensen zullen al bezig zijn in te loggen voor het volgende programma. Ik zie je zo meteen op het andere, met het andere nummer weer allemaal heel graag terug. En dan heb ik ook, voordat we afsluiten, een boodschap gestuurd. Jarchei Kallo moet natuurlijk ook financieel overeind blijven. Ik hoop dat u in staat bent om de mogelijkheid heeft om ons financieel te steunen. Hartelijk dank. Ik stop share. Ik eindig dit stuk en zien we elkaar over 2 minuten weer terug. Hartelijk dank.